Dory Brownlow will present.
Thank you, Commissioner Slotnick and Commissioners. So this is a process that we have talked about for quite some time, but most officially started in June, I believe it was, with the hiring of a consultant to begin analyzing the area out at the Y and coming up with a plan for the district. And the county contracted with Community Development Services, Janet Cornish and Lynette Windemaker, and they actually going to do the primary presentation today. So I'll pass on to them in just a minute here. And what they're looking at is the ordinance, which establishes the plan, and we've all developed a comprehensive development plan. So that's what's before you is the first hearing on that, and there will be a second hearing that they'll talk about. Before I pass it on to them, I wanted to mention two things. One was something that just came up today and from Cindy Kennedy about some surplus sites out in this area. And one is a present DEQ site. And so, just kind of exciting to me. It's just one more way we can maybe work together on making improvements out at the Y. But the other is...
Dory, my computer just cut out right there, and you said some circle, and then it went.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Cindy Kennedy contacted me about a surplus site out that.
What's a surplus?
It's a state Superfund site.
Oh, so okay.
Out with those, I think it's from some of that brownfield money. I'm not sure. This was just an hour ago that we were emailing back and forth. So I could see in the future some ability to possibly partner and whether that there's some public infrastructure issues there that the TED might be able to help with. Way too soon to tell, but it was just an example to me of another way we all might be able to partner in making this area out here improved environmentally.
Great.
So the other thing is annexation, and one of the is if in the future the city determines it wants to annex when the district, if the commission adopts it, sunsets, there's been discussion of there being a period of time from the sunsetting of the district until that was to happen by the city. So I have drafted, gone through the sewer documents and the other contracts that we have out there and have to the city a proposed contract for that to take place. We're negotiating that and hopefully we'll be meeting next week and be able to come up with some terms on that annexation schedule. So that is in the process or happening on the side of what Janet and Lynette and I have been working with. So with that, I will pass it on, I believe, to Janet Cornish.
Yes, thank you. I can see all the light from my Venetian blinds is shining. So I think I have the ability to share my screen. Is that correct, Emmy?
Should.
Yes. Yep. You should be able to.
Okay. So if I just put up can you all see this?
Not yet.
Okay. So how can I open share tray? That might be it. How about now?
Can you click on if you open share tray and then click on the PowerPoint?
Okay. Ah, there it is. Got it.
Hi, Janet.
So
there should be on your taskbar a little icon that says share content. And if you choose that, you should see the different windows you can open. Does that show up for you?
Now it says the open share tray, but no, that doesn't do it.
Okay.
More
You can also email me your presentation if you would like, if that would be easier.
I'm just trying to see, just trying to find this. I have enter full screen show device. I have a share tray open. But that one doesn't allow me to go into this particular PowerPoint.
Okay, I'll put my email in the chat, and
Okay.
then if you wouldn't mind just emailing it to me, I can go ahead and share that for you.
Yeah, it'll go really fast. My apologies. Here we
No
go.
problem.
Ebrusto. Okay, Ebrusto. Can you spell it? Oh, there it is. Can you do it one more time? EBR.
ISTOW.
At Missoula County dot.
US.
US.
Yep.
Okay, here it comes. Almost uploaded. Okay, here it comes. You should. It'll say PowerPoint in the message. There you go. Did it come in?
Yep, just came in, so I'll share it right now.
Thank you.
Before, I'll just say Janet, Emmy, and I practiced that and it worked yesterday. So.
Okay. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
So-
no problem.
Okay, so as Dory mentioned, we're going to be talking today about the new Y Targeted Economic Development District. And next slide, please. And what we're going to cover in this presentation is why Missoula County has considered the creation of this district. Just a few words on what is targeted economic development, a quick overview of tax increment financing, which is one of the tools that's available within these districts, the steps that are involved in creating a targeted economic development district, a general map of the area, the infrastructure deficiencies that we identified, the comprehensive plan, just an overview, some questions and discussion, and then that would be followed by the action that the Board of County Commissioners would take after the public hearing. Next slide, please. So in the Missoula County Growth Policy and supporting documents, there's 3 points that are that support the creation of a targeted economic development district. And these are to promote economic development in order to improve employment and expand the tax base. And that first bullet is really a combination of several that address employment and tax base in order for the county to provide services to its citizens. The second is to foster secondary value-adding industries, which we'll define in just a moment. And the third is that investment in public infrastructure to support the first two, job creation, increased tax base, and fostering economic development in the secondary value-adding sector. Next slide, please. There we go. Thank you. So more specifically within the Missoula County growth policy specific goals and objectives, and let me just step aside here for a moment and explain that there is a very strong link in the Montana Urban Renewal Law, which is where TEDs are authorized. There's a link between that law and Montana's planning statutes. In other words, this is an implementing tool that's available to local governments, the creation of districts, but it has to be supported by the general community vision, which is typically expressed, or it is expressed in the area growth policy. So that in order for this to go forward, we have to show those links, that how the Missoula County has expressed its desire for this kind of development or economic development. And you can see in these goals, we have, economic development, and again, necessary infrastructure, revitalize infrastructure deficient areas, encourage value adding. So we're really, you can see the language in that growth policy really supports and directs the county to engage in these activities. Next slide, please. And the next, so what is targeted economic development? What do we mean? It's generally, as defined in the state statute, the investment in public infrastructure to encourage value-adding economic development. And here are the definitions that we use. Value-added products are those that turn raw materials into something else, or that turn or are products that are made from raw materials, or products that are made by improving on an existing or intermediate material or product. So it's building value to a product that builds value. The other law that is important to remember is that these are products that could be sold in interstate commerce. It doesn't mean they have to be, but that they're capable of being sold in interstate commerce. So something that could be shipped, could be consumed here or used here, but also could be shipped elsewhere. And an industry that engages in those these activities could be producing these value-adding products. So there's a very kind of a manufacturing focus here, or building furniture out of wood, beer out of hops, whatever it might be. You're actually adding value to a resource. Or a value-adding industry can be based in technology, where its operations through the application of knowledge or labor adds value to a product or process, such as perhaps improving software or medical advancements or better solar energy panels. So again, it's not just the physical value that's being enhanced in value adding, but it could also be the application of knowledge or labor that adds value to an overall product or process. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, some of you are probably already aware of what tax increment financing is. It's a tool that can be used in urban renewal districts and targeted economic development districts. It's authorized by state law. It actually followed the original creation of this law, but it is a tool that's now available, has been since the mid-1970s. It allows property tax dollars that accrue, that result from new private development within the TED, to be used for public improvements, public infrastructure improvements. Tax increment financing does not add any new tax or tax levy. What it does, it affects the way that incremental increases that result from new investment, how those increases are distributed once collected. Next slide. Thank you. So to look at this in a visual sense, you begin with either stagnating or declining, or in some cases a tax base that's increasing much less rapidly than the rest of that community or governing area. And you establish a base year. And in that base year, you look at the taxes that are being currently collected and levied by the various taxing jurisdiction, and that becomes your base. And those tax dollars that are being collected at the time of the district's creation, or the provision, excuse me, the creation of the tax increment provision, those taxes continue to be distributed to the various taxing jurisdictions, the county, fire district, schools, the state of Montana. But any new taxes that result from new investment are set aside, all except the 6 mil university levy, and the other levy that's excluded are any voted levies that occur after the tax increment provision goes into place, such as maybe a new bond for a new firehouse or school district. Those are, if those are expressed in mills, those are not included in the calculation of the increment. But all of the rest of the taxing jurisdictions' mill levies are levied against the incremental taxable increase, taxable value increase, and that is the increment that is then available to the county for investment in public infrastructure in support of the targeted economic development district. When the TIF provision ends, the district itself can continue, but the tax increment financing provision ends. Then at that point in time, the base plus the incremental value all becomes part of the tax base and is available then for distribution to all the various taxing jurisdictions. But nothing here, I want to reiterate that there's no new tax levied as a result of this district. It's only that any new investment that generates taxes, that those tax dollars are then, those resulting tax dollars are available to the county to be used within that district for infrastructure in support of value-adding economic development. Next slide, please. Thank you. So creating, oh, and by the way, if the Board of County Commissioners chooses to adopt this district and plan, the base year for the purposes of calculating the increment would begin on January 1st of this year, 2020. So any investment that incurs in the Y area after January 1st of this year, any new investment, those taxes would be available for investment in the district. The steps to create the TED begin, as Dory mentioned, with an analysis of an area. Usually that area is larger than the area we end up with in the district, and review that for infrastructure deficiencies. The law says in order to create a TED, you have to establish that there are infrastructure deficiencies and that those deficiencies are essentially an obstacle to economic development. The second is, which was done on August 13th, which you acted on, was to adopt a resolution of infrastructure deficiency, and essentially determining that the area is eligible for designation as a TED. We then went on to prepare the plan. As I mentioned, as Dory mentioned, we did this in conjunction with the county. We also met with school and fire district representatives. The statute calls for their involvement, but we've always done that in any case because, of course, those districts are affected by the tax increment financing provision, and we've had really productive meetings with the school and fire districts. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the effort to do this, the plan has to be in conformance with your growth policy and in accordance with the zoning that's established for the area. And we worked with the Missoula Consolidated Planning Board and the CAP staff, who were very helpful, very really wonderful, providing their expertise and support for this effort and offering their edits to our plan. It was a very positive experience, and then that was brought before the planning board to establish that it was in fact in conformance with the growth policy and accordance with the zoning established in the growth policy, or land use policy. Where that brings us to today, where we are holding a public hearing to provisionally adopt by resolution the ordinance. That's how Missoula County does this, to create the TED, and that's the first reading and a public hearing, which was noticed. Every property owner in the district received a letter that was published in the paper, and the taxing jurisdictions were also notified of the meeting today. On November 12th, you would have the second reading on the ordinance and final adoption by resolution of that ordinance. And then once, if you choose to do that, once these steps are complete, all of the materials that were created as a result of this effort are provided to the Montana Department of Revenue, who will then certify the base year as January 1, 2020, and allow the county to begin measuring incremental increases. Next slide. Here is a general map of the area to give you a general sense. This area was ultimately selected because it met all the criteria. It was infrastructure deficient. It was zoned in accordance with the growth policy. Its land uses conform to those identified in the growth policy, and it met the other standards set forth in your land use element, as well as the growth policy itself for selection as a TED. Next slide. Thank you. The infrastructure deficiencies that were identified, as you see before, a lot of the roads in the area are unpaved. There's poor, if any, pedestrian access. The water and wastewater systems are deficient. Certainly water, as we noted talking to the fire district, that the water to provide fire suppression is not adequate in all cases. There's drainage problems in the area, and some air quality compliance issues. Rail spur access is somewhat limited, and then there's little or spotty broadband access. Next slide, please. In pursuing this associated with infrastructure, the plan then provides us opportunities to do a number of things, and this is just a list. We already talked about the annexation schedule, but there's other things that we want to look at. Things about fire, perhaps supporting fire and safety inspection, looking at drainage. These are things that we can do. The plan is an enabling document. It doesn't outline specific projects and timelines, but gives the county commission the authority or the enabling words to proceed with various value-adding economic development infrastructure projects, public infrastructure projects to achieve your goals. Next slide, please. The goals of the plan are, again, they align well with the growth policy, but promoting economic development, enhancing transportation access. One of the opportunities associated with this area, of course, is that it's located at the junction of I-93 and Interstate 90. It's the opportunity for manufacturing or other activities will depend on good transportation resources, and the opportunity to enhance those resources exists within this, statutorily and allowed within the TED's law, but also, it has opportunities in your plan to do this. And then the efficient delivery of public infrastructure and services. Next slide, please. So the action today is, or the actions today and next month include the following. And after this presentation and any questions that the commission has, you can open the public hearing to receive any public input. That would be followed by a motion. Somebody has a baby here. A motion to introduce and provisionally adopt the resolution to create the TED and adopt the boundaries and adopt the plan. So that is the action before you today following the public hearing. This is essentially the first reading of the ordinance. The second reading would occur on November 12th if you choose to approve it on first reading today, and that would constitute the final adoption. 30 days following that, the ordinance becomes effective, so on December 12th, and anytime after that, the county can file the paperwork. We'll be working with Dory to do that with the state of Montana to certify the base. Next slide, please. So that ends our presentation. And Lynette, did you have anything to add?
No, I don't. I'm here. I'm available to answer questions if you need my help, but I will keep myself muted.
Thank you. Okay, so members of the commission, Lynette and I are happy to answer questions. And at this time, I turn it back to Dory and members of the commission. Thank you so much. And thanks, Emmy, for running the show.
Dory, I just have one question. I think you're muted.
Great. Yeah, great. Go.
I just wanted to make sure that we could actually bond against this and begin some of these improvements in the near term before any development happened, with the idea that then those the improvements that we did would catalyze future development. Is that accurate?
You could, and I don't know that Andrew's on the call. I mean, the only thing you'd want to, you'd have to have a way to service the bonds. But there's also a way, and I know we did this in a different district where the county lent money to the district and then got paid back. So there are tools that could be used to sort of catalyze, get that moving, so you're not waiting for too many years. Because
once, Matt, if we were to address some of these deficiencies like the poorly paved roads and the curb and gutter, the sewer and the broadband, then this site would look much more attractive to potential tenants or purchasers. And then we would see that kind of blossoming in industry that we're looking for. Right. And you could right away, especially start studying it to figure out what is the best sort of plan moving forward in those capital improvements. Great. Thanks. Other questions?
Yeah, I don't have any questions right now. Thanks, Janet, for your in-depth presentation.
Linda has her hand up, though. Linda Miller.
Yes, hi. I own 10 acres out by the Y in this area, and you were so generous to approve growth of my building last year. Thank you. And I do look at continuing to grow out in this region. Do we have an approximate cost that what will the cost effect be to current residents out here of growing businesses?
Zero.
Yeah, there is no cost to you.
Okay. Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something hidden there.
So basically, I'll see if I can summarize it. As property values increase from the date that this thing is set, let's say it was set today, that increase, that increment that it goes up, doesn't go back into the general fund, but stays available to do projects in this area to improve the area. So you pay no more tax than you would have ordinarily, and you're going to see development that most likely you wouldn't have seen. Improvement in curb and gutter, sewer and broadband and pavement quality and that sort of thing. This is a real boon.
Beautiful.
To it out there.
Beautiful. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, for sure.
This is new to me. Yes. Thank you.
And yours was a dental business?
Yes.
That's what I remember.
That's right. Thank you. Yeah, still growing. Some of our best months ever. So thank you.
He's got teeth.
Yes.
There's a couple more. Chris and Jordan have their hands up.
Yeah.
Chris, you can go if you'd like.
Chris, you're on mute.
Or Mark. I'll go, I guess. Waiting.
We got Chris.
All right. Myself and Chief Calnan out in Frenchtown Fire did send in a letter, and hopefully the county commissioners were able to take a look at it. In a nutshell, our concern is basically what had happened with the airport TIF when it sunsetted in the annexation. I know Janet and Dory have discussed this on numerous occasions and have talked with us. I was just curious, the county commissioners' feeling on the potential negotiations with the city on a delay of annexation, and if anything else has come of that as far as any talks with the city.
My understanding, Chris, is we have to negotiate that, but our goal would be as long a timeline out as possible.
Okay.
Do you have anything? You know what I mean? Like we want to delay as long as possible, rather than for us put all this work into it and then it goes into the city. I don't know what those dates would be, but we'll have to negotiate for it. But our goal is as long as possible.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Chris, we totally understand your concern and are, as Commissioner Slotnick noted, in support of doing what we can to elongate that period of time that you can reap the benefits of the increased property values out there after this district sunsets.
Yeah, that sentiment is very much appreciated because but by design these areas grow, and that's what we want to see. But with that growth comes, well, to put it plainly, a lot more work for the fire department on and considering the fact that we're already short-staffed, and so yeah, to be able to see some of those benefits after the sunset date it would be very welcomed by MRFD. So thank you.
That's our goal.
Mr. Chairman, this is Janet. I wonder if I might add something to that conversation.
Sure.
Yes, Chris, I think we've talked about this before too. In the plan, Lynette and I did put in a couple of things that were specific and a result of our conversations. And one was, the ability to add more cisterns and other water sources, other water community, or I don't know how exactly it would be done. As Dory said, we still have to do some planning. But the other is that money can also go for programs, and the potential, if there are increased calls for inspections in that area, it might be possible to create a fire inspection program that would help the department offset the costs of and the resources that you would be expending on additional inspections. And while that's not, we can't, the plan doesn't authorize that, the county commission could certainly consider that as a use of the tax increment financing funds or other funding sources to help you even before the provision sunsets. So I'm hoping there'll be some other opportunities that we don't have to wait for the sunset period before you can see some advantages.
Okay, thanks for that, Janet. And I would be glad, whether it be some of the water fire water infrastructure or those inspection programs, I'd be glad to help out with that any way I can.
Great. I think we had Jordan and Joe both have their hands up.
I'll go ahead. Kind of gonna relate to what Chris was talking about. I think that everything out there right now, and just to speak a little bit about myself, I have a 5-acre property out in the Y off of Dayton, which was just recently paved, which has been great for traffic out there. I know a lot of the residents like it. I've actually been working with Pete in the Rural Fire District on fire suppression and worked with Mark Bellin, who's also on the call, pertaining to engineering and fire suppression issues. And a lot of the things that have frustrated from talking to some property owners out there, development and growing their businesses, is that lack of water. And I know it's one of the items on the improvements that we do need, but I think if we get fire suppression capabilities out there ahead of broadband, ahead of roads, that's going to really, really help that area grow, because number one, it's safety, and we got to have safety out there. And number two, it's the biggest cost of all. I mean, putting cistern tanks in the ground is a large ticket item. And I know for residential development, it has really inhibited the ability for people to put in subdivisions due to that number. So if there's some way we can find out how to get that out there first and foremost, that would be great. I know it would help a lot of people, and it would help the fire department do their job, because this area is growing and we don't want to have our safety, be at risk in an area that's growing. So, just kind of working with Chris on that, and whoever is in the area, if we got to get more people involved, I'd be out on the forefront there trying to help get that done, because I think that's really important to help those first responders out as much as we can.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Mr. Easton.
Good afternoon, board. This is Joe Easton, E-A-S-T-O-N. Today I represent Jackson Contractor Group and Double Hall LLC. We are developer builder that has built in the Missoula Development Park, and obviously works with Dory and the County Commission consistently on projects out there, both in Alloy North and for other owners, and built other projects in the park, and it's been very successful. I support the goals of the plan, and I support the reasons of establishing the new TED. As the commission and Dory begin to move towards execution of the plan and establishing rules, both design, zoning, capacity, uses, all of those need to be critically reviewed on how easy it is for development to happen. Because as you might understand, a developer's largest risk is the unknowns of execution of a potential plan or a use. And so knowing what the zoning will be, if there's any changes or additional design considerations in that TED, what increment financing can or should be spent on for new projects that are inside and outside the right-of-way, and then eventually other perhaps non-financial incentives to build in the TED, such as speed of permitting, speed of review, and if you tick certain boxes with your plan or your project, that it's granted as an administrative review. So many of those things I know the commission and Dory and other entities have looked at. So as you begin to put in the execution of the plan, those kind of goals are important. Thanks.
Thank you. We have another person who has a question.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Great presentation, Janet and Dory. My name is Mark Ballon with Territorial Landworks. I'm an engineering consultant that's been working in the area for years. I've represented a lot of the lots out in the Missoula industrial park here. There's 96 lots, and I've worked with the county over the last 4 or 5 years to put together a paving RSID for Derby Drive, Summit Drive, Inspiration Drive, Futurity Drive, and there is a very substantial infrastructure deficiency here that's Janet's identified. And we've looked at the RSID options, and we really settled on a nice road paving section, and we got looking at the underground utilities, and there were some sewer issues. And I reached out to Dory about a year ago, and she said, hey, your timing's perfect, because we wanted to know how to get water or look at a potential future water development out here. And I'm going to echo what Jordan said. Water deficiency is a major hurdle for any kind of development out here. We're really struggling just providing potable domestic water. The groundwater in the aquifer isn't that great. The quality water isn't that great. Firefall protection becomes very challenging, where we're placing very large cisterns just kind of randomly on a per development basis. And so we think the coordination of development of a water system and really bolstering and supporting the fire flows and the fire department out here would be great. And really just getting the infrastructure here. So we've really struggled with this RSID. It's a very good vehicle. We have an ad hoc committee, and we have a lot of support for it. But once we started getting some traction with this TED, the ad hoc committee is very excited to look at this option and maybe pairing that up with some RSID opportunities. But after working on this for 4 or 5 years, this seems like a great opportunity and a mechanism for funding the infrastructure we need to really develop this area to its potential. Thank you.
Great, thank you. You have anyone else? All right. Dave or Juan, do you have any other questions?
No, thanks for this. Yeah, Janet, really appreciated the presentation, and yeah, thanks for Chris and all the comments. Did Dave freeze? Oh, okay.
Well, I appear to be freezing today. I'm not, I can't stay that motionless. So I'll turn off my camera here because it's a little bit of an annoyance. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I can make it unless, do you have it? Okay. Yeah, I move that we introduce and provisionally adopt the ordinance creating the Y Targeted Economic Development District.
I will second that.
All right, thanks. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well, see this again in November.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, Kent looks like his hand is up.
Thank you.
And Kent's muted.
Yeah. We're going to have a public hearing, or were the questions asked the public hearing? I only had, you guys have been working on this forever, and I'm a latecomer, but I was curious as to why the property between West Broadway and the interstate south of the Y was not included. I can understand, you know, a lot of the area across the freeway, but it seems to me as I look at Google Earth that, and again, you guys have been working on this for a long time, so I was kind of waiting for the public hearing to open before I said anything, but that was just the question I had, is about the area covered. It seemed like that was it would be nice to have both sides of West Broadway covered as part of this district.
Dory, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I'll have to pull it up unless Janet, did you?
Well, I'm also gonna defer to Lynette, but I'll start. The area that any areas that were excluded were primarily because they weren't in conformance, the use wasn't in conformance with the growth policy, or they weren't zoned in conformance with the growth policy. So in the future, it would have been nice to include some of these areas now, but we couldn't under the statutory requirements that they be zoned appropriately. The county, if it wanted to go through the process of clearing up those growth policy, land use and zoning issues, could add those parcels at a later date to the TED. You have to go through the steps again, but that could be done. But that's primarily why. some of those areas that might have seemed logical to include were not. Lynette, did you want to add to that?
I think that was the main reason a lot of them were left out. I think we also found that those properties that tended to be across Broadway to the east and across 10th to US 10 to the north seemed like they didn't have quite as many infrastructure deficiencies as this area did, but it was mostly the growth policy zoning questions that we didn't. That's why we didn't take them in. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Kent, this is Dory. You can sure get hold of me if you have some specific questions too, and we can go over those, because they did study a larger area with the intent in the future they may be appropriate to be added in, but weren't at the present time.
Okay, well, I think that takes care of it for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. All right, our next public hearing is on a resolution on Lalonde Ranch, and Chet Krauser will present.
And actually, Josh, I think I will kick things off here if that's okay.
Absolutely, please do.
And can everyone see the screen I'm sharing?
Yeah, nicely done.
Okay. You will not be able to see my face because I'm apparently frozen, and also just so folks know, it is no indication that I am just wearing my bathrobe today or anything in the world of virtual reality that we're in. So anyway, thanks so much. This public hearing that we're having today on a proposed resolution, I would say, is about 2 years or so in the making, or looked at another way, is about 29 years in the making since Missoula County acquired the property that is now the remnant portion of the Lalonde Ranch that we see. The broader ranch included what has become the development park out by the airport and has been developed successfully over the past few decades. So like I mentioned, I will share a few slides, but this is going to be a bit of a tag team in terms of talking about this site and also trying to encapsulate what is a vision for what this place might become in the future. So I'll share my slides. I'll turn it over to Chet. Then we'll hear a few words from Lauren Flynn with Montana State Parks, Matt Lotzenheiser out at the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula, and Emmy Shear, who's the City of Missoula's Historic Preservation Officer. And I suspect there might be a few other folks on the line who also want to share some thoughts. So the Lalonde Ranch, which sits out near the interstate by Big Sky Brewing, by Airway Boulevard, was originally settled upon by Adam Lalonde, that bearded gentleman in the left portion of the what otherwise might be a female-dominated frame here. He settled there in 1870, and the small log cabin that still exists in the same site as it was originally constructed can be seen today. And what's so unique about the Lalonde Ranch that Missoula County owns, and I should say this is a rarity, that we as a public entity are the stewards and owners of this property. So it's not a matter of are we looking at needing to or wanting to acquire a cultural resources or historic property, but rather we already have it in our possession. But this site demonstrates in pretty stark relief the progression of settlement and agricultural development in the Missoula Valley from Adam Lalonde's fairly humble small log cabin to the four-square colonial revival house that is also on the property. So this photo taken in 1908 shows the Lalonde family. I love this picture. Well, it scares me a little bit because I can't imagine having a family of this size, but I love this picture because I also see Mrs. Lalonde looking over at Mr. Lalonde, and I wonder what she is thinking at this point. So moving to the mid-20th century, after the ranch passed out of Lalonde ownership to the Gooden family, here you can see some of the structures on the ranch, the large hay barn in the foreground, which is no longer there, but you can then in the background see a couple of the barn structures that are still extant and on the property. The log cabin and four-square house that are out there today are somewhat obscured in this shot by the poplar trees and other foliage. And this is Alvin Gooden. This is around 1955 on the property. Some of the gardens, orchard, which by the way is part of trying to capture our imaginations of what this place might be in the future, recreating some of the vegetation structure and orchards that once exist there would certainly be a possibility and probably desirable. Through this end, this is some of the native wildlife there on the Lalonde Ranch at one point in time. Peacock drinking from a sprinkler head. And it's a unique property here in the Missoula Valley. Not only is it highly accessible, which some might see as a deterrent to its value or a drawback, but it is actually an asset, I would claim, because this constellation of buildings and structures that really embody and tell the story of the agricultural progression in the Missoula Valley is easily accessible and arguably one of the most strategically placed parcels of public property on the outskirts or in the Missoula Valley, and has a great potential for, I believe, being a portal for visitors entering our community, learning about not only the heritage and history here, but also what else this community has to offer. So what has preceded today? Like I mentioned, over the past couple of years, there have been a number of folks involved in a working group looking at how we can move this forward in a way that really sets the groundwork for this property being preserved and interpreted to not only Missoulians and Missoula County residents, but visitors to our community more broadly conceived. One of the things that we worked on and quickly realized that we needed to accomplish, and this is what we're trying to get away from, is this highly unwelcoming image that you have here, which is a big old no trespassing sign in front of the property. There's no way that anyone would recognize this is publicly owned land and tells a critical story of the Missoula Valley, development of the valley, and the heritage of this place. So in what we've attempted to do over the past couple of years is, how do we take the initial incremental steps to get this no trespassing sign down and to begin to open up this property, not in maybe the ultimate sense of what this might be 10 or 20 years from now, but incrementally open it up, interpret it, and make improvements to this property that will make it an attractive and vital place for the Missoula Valley. So one of the things that we worked on over the past few years, and particularly over the past year, was coming up with a mission and vision statement, initial goals for this site, and folding those into what we have called a strategic framework for the Lalonde Ranch, which again is something that came into county possession in the year 1991. So I'll just read this for folks who might not be able to view this via their screen if they're just on the phone. The mission that we've come up with, and this was something that was a collaborative effort. Jenny Tribe helped mediate a number of sessions and stakeholder meetings to come up with the vision and mission. But the mission of this site is the Lalonde Ranch preserves Missoula County's history, where heritage, culture, and sense of place are celebrated for the purpose of education and reflection on our connection to the past. Its location serves as a gateway to Missoula Valley history and helps tell the story of the area, including its thousands of years as part of the homeland of the Salish and Kalispel people and its remarkable place in the valley. Excuse me. Let me move this out of the way. Valley's rich agricultural history over the past century. And I should say this last sentence that we added here was something that came out of a consultation with the Salish and Kalispel Culture Committee, because recognizing, as Commissioner Slotnick read at the very beginning of this meeting, this place, and in fact this entire valley, was the Aboriginal homelands of the Salish and Kalispel, and that is a part of the story of this property also. The vision for Lalonde. Lalonde Ranch is a safe, accessible public place with basic infrastructure for self-guided experiences through signage and educational materials, a strategic plan, sustainable funding, and a functional organizational structure guide site development and management. The public enjoys compatible uses at the site, as well as historic and cultural hands-on educational experiences. I'm not going to go through all of these guiding principles that are on the screen here today. These are found in the strategic framework along with the vision and mission statements. But I'll just draw attention to the fact that we were very explicit in this and recognizing that indeed this site has been impacted by adjacent development, but that has not diminished in any complete way the historic integrity of this site. And in fact, that is a piece of the story that I think is worthy of celebrating and raising up that tension between historic and modern, and what that means for our community and how can we interpret that. So the resolution that's before us today does basically four things. Besides all of the whereas recitals that you'll see in the resolution that talk about how this property came into Missoula County possession, some of the prior studies that were analyzing the property and assessing the property, what this resolution does by way of its therefore be it resolved statements is fourfold. It adopts the strategic framework. It formally puts Missoula County on record as committing to the long-term stewardship of the site's historic heritage and cultural values, and along those lines removes this cloud of uncertainty that has hovered over this property for decades. It supports submittal of a National Register of Historic Places nomination form, which really will be part of the bedrock of setting the stage for seeking funding and entering into partnerships with organizations who might want to help on the management of this property. And fourthly, it identifies our very own Community and Planning Services, CAPS, as the primary coordinator for maintenance and management of the site. Leading up to today, we've received a number of support letters from none other than the Board of Trustees of the Historical Museum of Fort Missoula, the Missoula Historic Preservation Commission, Montana Historic Preservation Office, Preserve Historic Missoula, Preserve Montana. I've had the chance over the past several months to present to our Parks and Trails Advisory Board for Missoula County, the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula's trustees, the Missoula Historic Preservation Commission. As I mentioned earlier, we've consulted with the Salish Kalispel Culture Committee, and I want to just say a special thanks to the many individuals who participated in stakeholder meetings, the working group that we've assembled over the past few years to work on this, some of whom are on the line today, and those individuals who participated in some of those specific focus group discussions about the future of Lalonde. Just in conclusion, before I turn it over to Chet, again, what might this place be in the future? I think it's, as I mentioned, strategically located at a place of public ownership that is unlike any other in the valley. There's potential for pop-up exhibits, restored orchards, opening it up incrementally and initially to school groups. Maybe at some point in time we would contemplate some sort of Moon Randolph homestead type caretaker arrangement at the site. We've had inquiries from the Bureau of Land Management and other land management agencies locally about the possibility of this being not only a site of a welcome center celebrating the agricultural heritage of the valley, but also a key and strategically located welcome center for public land agencies, management agencies in Missoula County. So with that, I will turn it over to Chet Krauser. If Chet, you'd like to say a few words, and then feel free to introduce Lauren Flynn.
Sure, thanks, Dave. So I'm Chet Krauser, the Director of Community and Planning Services, and I think I got an invite from Dave before I officially started in my position to tour Lalonde, and so it's kind of fun to reflect back on that initial contact and think of all of the conversations we've had up to this point, and then even looking at the mission, vision, and resolution. There's just been a tremendous amount of work from a number of folks. So I really appreciate all of that, and it's neat to see it come together here in the presentation today. I think, as you know, as Dave noted on the resolution, Community and Planning Services role has been really since the beginning with Dave's first invite to be included in a lot of these conversations, and also the Parks, Trails, and Open Lands program with our program manager, Juniper Davis, to start to talk through some of what the potentials might be and how we might take some next steps. And as we started those conversations, we fairly quickly got to a point where we realized that we needed to make a decision about the future of the site from the standpoint of whether preserving its historic and cultural resources was the priority. And we really needed to get to that point before we were able to have very many of the next step conversations. So I think that's where we've gotten today. But we also, I think, took a pretty thoughtful approach to get there, and the effort that went into those conversations and the development of a mission and a vision, and some of those principles really were intended to set the stage in a good way to enable us to have some of these next conversations. The role that CAPS would have moving forward would be to convene the folks probably who have been part of the conversation already, although I think we probably expand that group at some level, and look back at some of the input that we've received so far, and then expand from there and try to determine what some appropriate next steps would be. As Dave mentioned, the historic register nomination is a pretty clear and obvious first step, but then there's a whole bunch of different ideas that started to come out as we were talking with folks during our focus groups about what we might do at the site. I'll turn it over to Lauren Flynn here in just a second, but I do think that one of the more important pieces of those next steps is really being purposeful and cautious at some level to make sure that we can gain some support and relevance for the site over time. Certainly for folks driving by, they'd recognize the interstate and other development around the site, and we certainly heard a lot of questions about the impact of that infrastructure on the historic qualities of the site. And I think there are a number of examples of other historic sites that have that type of infrastructure surrounding them and still manage to retain that connection to place and provide a connection for the people to have a physical tie, a sense of place tied to their heritage and their past. So I think there's some great value there. I think we've got some folks that are going to speak following me that can maybe talk more specifically about what that might look like in next steps moving forward. But I'm happy and excited to be helping coordinate those next step conversations. So with that, maybe I'll pass it off to Lauren Flynn. And if Lauren, you could maybe give us a little bit of your experience working with some sites and maybe any ideas that are immediate and obvious to you as to where we might go from here.
Yeah, thanks, Chet. Commissioners, I know most of you, but my name is Lauren Flynn. I'm the Regional Park Manager for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks here in West Central Montana. And prior to this position, I was actually a field manager and managed a couple of historic sites near Missoula, Travelers Rest State Park in Lolo and Fort Owen State Park down in Stevensville. Both of those are sites that, especially Travelers Rest, I think, that is impacted somewhat by the community. It's essentially in the middle of the growing bedroom community of Lolo. one of the things, and I've been out to Lalonde, Chet and I went out and did a tour of that site, and one of the things that I think is important to recognize is, and I think that this is sometimes something that's missed in our rush to kind of preserve history. We sometimes don't recognize that history is happening now, and that part of the story at some of these places can be how things have changed over time. I see in the mission that you're talking about how this is in the homeland of the Salish and the Kalispé people, and imagine that cabin that was built there was a little bit like a trophy home or something in 1870, and so and looking at the other structures there, obviously they weren't all built at the same time. So it's been a continuum that continues today. And so both interpreting and preserving the history, but then interpreting that as part of this a little bit of a lens that we can look through history from, I think is how we make it relevant to people today. There's plenty of challenges I think you'll face at that site. Some of them have already been mentioned. And I think that one of the challenges with historic sites, as Chet mentioned, is actually finding the support and the funding. And so I think that one of the things that's important to recognize is that it requires patience. That site has been in that kind of state since for 150 years now. We shouldn't try to rush to bring it back to some state that we're not sure what it might look like. So I think it's important to have patience and to recognize that historic sites, especially local historic sites, need to be local. And even though there's a tremendous opportunity there to capture visitors or travelers along I-90, people going to concerts at the Big Sky venue, there's any of the hotels in the area out there, that the support and the future of that place should be from a local standpoint. And it seems like you're doing that. I'm happy to answer any specific questions you might have, but I thought it would be nice Chet thought it would be nice to have that perspective of someone who's worked in sites that are both historic in nature, but also part of the fabric of a community.
Thanks, Lauren. That's great. And you'll be sticking around if folks do have additional questions. But in the meantime, Matt, are you available? Matt Lotson?
I am, Dave. Dave, thanks for having me, and afternoon, commissioners and everybody else. Before I touch a little bit on the relationship here with the Historical Museum and what we can offer this property, I just wanted to thank everybody over the course of the last year and a half or so that's worked on the mission and vision for this site. I've been involved in the project for about 6 years now. I met with Dory shortly after taking my position in 2014 to take a look at the property, and I've watched the property go through several different ideas and different meetings and sessions and those. And I do have to say that the work that was done in the last year and a half with developing a mission and a vision are incredibly important to allowing this site to move forward and starting to actually form our idea of what this can be for Missoula County and how it can bring value to our residents here in the county. I also think it was wonderful with that group to kind of talk through this and to think about ideas that, this isn't something where it's going to need a huge influx of investment from the county initially. I think, doing this resolution is going to allow us to seek that National Register designation. And then there's a number of other opportunities that presents, whether it be forming a friends group to help with this organization, or we're starting to do some minimal, inexpensive interpretation of the site to try to raise public awareness of it as well, too. I also think something that came out of that I think is important is that this is a long-term commitment. This isn't something, as Lauren mentioned, that we're not looking to have a finished product in 2 years or 3 years. It's something where, we're committing to the value of the site and then developing it over time. which I think is going to be a great way to approach the project. I think one of the things Dave said, and I know there's been some questions about why Lalonde, why is it unique? What does it bring that other sites maybe don't? And I think first and foremost, it's a publicly owned site. I mean, there are other ranches in the Missoula Valley that have similar type structures, but they're not publicly owned. This is something that is already here and part of Missoula County's government that we own. I think, you know, as some of the others said, there's a real opportunity here to tell the story of our communities develop and actually embrace that idea that it does sit in the middle of a development park, but to also show that as kind of change over time, going from a ranch project being a development park, and how Missoula County has grown and changed over time. The other thing I think, and I know the property itself has been impacted, but where I see the real value for interpretation of this site is thinking about the buildings themselves. I mean, we have this opportunity to interpret Missoula County history. I know I hit Dave yesterday with the tagline, from homesteading to prosperity. So you literally on one small piece of property can see a 10 by 10 cabin, and then just across the yard from it, you can see this beautiful brick home. And you can really trace the history of ranching in Missoula County and the development of this family and their prosperity through these two structures. And there's some really interesting ways we can interpret that history there at Lalonde Ranch. So, you know, as far as the role of the Historical Museum, we have a professional staff here at the museum. And I think the role we can play is to work with Chet and CAPS to really look at the historical interpretation of this site and to provide content and help them with preparing that interpretation. And again, raising public awareness, but also providing those stories and framing those stories that Lalonde Ranch has the capability to tell. The last thing I'll say before I'll turn it back over to Dave here is that I also see there is an opportunity not just for us to work with Lalonde, but for Lalonde to benefit other cultural organizations and other museums in our community. I know one of the challenges the folks here at Fort Missoula have is that there's not a lot of wayfinding to get folks to the fort. And sometimes, you know, you see that sign that says Fort Missoula Historic District right off the highway, but it doesn't tell you that you have to drive 7 miles to get there. So I think that, you know, as the sites develop, there's a real potential for it to become kind of a gateway to our community to raise awareness of some of the other museums and cultural institutions here in Missoula, and to help direct folks to those because of its accessibility to the highway. So thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak, and Dave, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Matt. And to round out our slate of introductory speakers, we have Emmy Shear, who's the Historic Preservation Officer for the City of Missoula, which is apropos today since this property is now squarely within the city limits of the City of Missoula. So, Emmy?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and I want to thank everyone who's worked on this. You know, coming into this position, it's clear that this has been worked on for years and years and years. Way before my time, and that's something really special and something to think about. As a Historic Preservation Officer for the city, what I wanted to talk about today is how historic preservation is inherently local, and how recently in the past 3 years there's just been this latent community interest in our heritage resources. I've talked about this before, but you know, kind of the golden rule of every growing city in the American West is that everyone has their own mark. And so we had the mark, and that really kind of changed the path and direction of preservation and heritage resource, cultural resource management as we knew it. People became very interested on the community level. So of course the preservationists want to save this building, but what I've found is that the community is very interested in our heritage and our sense of place as well. We started the Unseen Missoula tours 3 years ago, and we've sold out of every single tour, including this summer, which is pretty phenomenal given that it was COVID. That led to developing our Downtown Heritage Interpretation Plan, which the county did support and adopt our resolution for that. And why I bring that up is because that is kind of our beginning blueprint to create a broader synthesis of heritage in Missoula, and that includes the county. We want to see all these different organizations and agencies come together to create that networking and wayfinding that Matt was talking about, and create that community common thread. And the Lalonde is integral in that. It's an existing heritage resource. It's publicly owned, and it is up to us to protect and preserve our natural and cultural assets for the common good. There's so much interest in that right now, and there's such community backing. It's up to us to move forward with that, and we have to have that vision, not just in 10 years or 20 years, but in 50 years. What is it going to look like out there? We undeniably will not regret our decision to save something, but it's highly possible that we will regret our decision not to. I just want to say that Heritage Missoula, the group that put together the interplan, is fully supportive. We want to make this an interplan for all of Missoula County. This would be a great step in that, and something that we want to incorporate moving forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions about preservation in Missoula City that we're working on, but just to lend our support for the county and incorporating this into our protected heritage resources.
Thanks, Emmy. Back to you, Josh, or whoever else is out there who might want to offer public comment.
Thanks a lot, Dave. That was a great presentation. Do we have anybody from the public who would like to add to this or ask questions of any of the presenters?
It's like Mr. Watson has his hand up.
Oh, I can't, in my screen, I can't see that. Okay. Mr. Watson.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Dave. I just wanted to, throw my support behind this whole effort. I probably have the dubious distinction of maybe the longest history with this project. I was looking back at my materials from the development park master planning we did in the late 90s, and I actually have a master plan for Lalonde, the whole Lalonde installation there. And so I've been meaning to get my paper copies out to John or losing my mind here, but your parks people, so that they have that in their files of the work we did way back then. So it's just a delight to see this finally progressing to this point, and I'm so happy that we're here where we are and we can move forward. Thanks again for all your help too.
Philip.
Yeah, this is Philip Benkling. I was Missoula's Historic Preservation Officer, and actually for Missoula County too, for a number of years, 11 years, I think. And so my involvement with the Lalonde also began in around 2000. And we've done tours out there, working with Missoula County and Barb Martins for one. The county put set aside $10,000 a year for a number of years to stabilize and make improvements out there, to upgrade there's an accessible bathroom in the Foursquare house. And so this is a great opportunity. I think I certainly support it. I did submit a letter earlier, and many of the things that are in my letter have been mentioned tonight about the evolution of sort of the place as an exhibit of living. I think I referred to it as kind of a living diorama. I'm involved with a number of historic sites around the state, including the Friends of Fort Owen, which Lauren mentioned. The Moon Randolph Homestead I've been involved with for another 20 years or so. And I'm also on the Montana Heritage Commission, and we manage Virginia City and Nevada City for you all, for us, for the state. And so I've got some familiarity with public involvement, public processes, and getting groups of people in to actually help do restoration work. So there's a whole host of opportunities that are presented by the 4 buildings that are out there, one of which is really not historic, and the orchard and the agricultural land that's on the other side of the barn is an opportunity to actually do some literally physical food growing, or agricultural demonstrations. So there's just a host of things that can be done. Matt referred to a few of them, and it's good to see Lauren involved in this with his experience at Travelers Rest. So I'd be happy to also answer any questions that you might have. And thank you for doing this.
Thanks, Philip. Anybody else have anything? I want to add one thing here. It's a fun fact for Chet. Really, Chet, we have shared this in common in that before I started my job with the county, I also accepted an invitation from Dave to tour Lalonde. So, for what it's worth, I think this means a lot to Dave.
What is that worth?
I think this means a lot to Dave. And I appreciate that all you folks who presented today would take the time to do it. And I really appreciate Lauren's comments about turning a site that has really been impacted by modernity into something that people still want to see and can experience history, and even as it's surrounded by something completely different. So thanks for all that.
I never got a tour from Dave. I feel jilted.
I think something happened there.
But
Good.
we can still do that, Juanita.
Fortunately I got a tour with Dory, and it was fantastic because to talk about that tension that you mentioned earlier, and then also to see the space that Philip mentioned in his letter, how important it is to have the intact, like, spatial configuration is pretty exciting. I mean, I went down to Fort Owen because I had never been there until you referenced it in a meeting a couple days ago, and it's a different feeling, and so I'm really excited about what Lalonde can offer, and that even with the interstate and Dino's and the development around it. So I wouldn't have been as excited about this project until I got to spend that time with Dory. So Dory, thank you. Yeah, and well, I'm gonna make a motion.
Do that.
Motion to approve this resolution to support the preservation of Lalonde Ranch.
I will second that, and the only thing that I would add is, if any of you, and I'm frozen up here, so I don't want to look at my frozen face. If any of you have ever been over to Fort Benton, Montana,
yes,
drive by the elementary school there, because on the side of the elementary school is a sign that you might not normally expect in Fort Benton, Montana, but on this sign it reads, and this is kind of from a WPA CCC era project, the sign reads, "Industry is useless without culture." And that has meaning on multiple levels. When it comes to the role of local government, it strikes a firm chord with me in that there's a role for us to play in the stewardship of our culture, and part of that is our cultural heritage that we too frequently do not avail ourselves of. And I think the opportunity we have today is to bend the curve a little on what we can do and demonstrate the ability to do here in Missoula County relative to culture and cultural heritage. So I guess I've already seconded it.
Thanks for all that, Dave. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Thanks a lot, everybody, for taking the time to speak about Lalonde. And thanks, Dave, and all the others who spent years working on this.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, and our final hearing of the day is our own Matt Heimel to talk about subdivision.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Matt Heimel here with CAPS. Before I proceed, I just want to check that the applicant or the representative is with us on the call, make sure they made it in.
Hi, Matt. Jenna Sage with Missoula Engineering here.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure. So let me share my PowerPoint here. Okay, so this is the proposed Double G Ranch subdivision. It is a minor subdivision that would result in a total of 5 lots. The applicant is Che Gerard with Double G Rentals, represented by James and Jenna Sage with Missoula Engineering. And I'll go into some highlights of the subdivision, and staff is recommending approval subject to conditions. The 18.3 acre subject property is located about half a mile north of Frenchtown off of Belker Lane and southwest of and adjacent to the Frenchtown Irrigation District's main ditch. The property is unzoned, and applicable plans are the 2016 Growth Policy and 2002 Regional Land Use Guide. The property is described with the residential land use designation that has a recommended density of 1 dwelling unit per 10 acres. The property also lies within an area described in the 2002 Regional Land Use Guide as the Frenchtown Activity Center. So the activity centers are intended to be the focal point for residential and commercial development, to really concentrate those kinds of developments in an area around the primary area of Frenchtown. So although the growth policy recommends 1 dwelling unit per 10 acres, the overlapping activity center designation is intended to support up to 2 dwelling units per 1 acre for a residential use. So the proposed subdivision does comply with the county growth policy. Excerpt of the agricultural extent map provided by Missoula Engineering. So the property is currently undeveloped and utilized for agriculture, mainly grazing of cows and horses, and is hayed from, I believe, May through August. And the subdivision is designed to allow for future agricultural use on lots 4 and 5, and this is the majority of the west approximate 15.79 acre portion of the subject property. This is an aerial exhibit provided by Missoula Engineering showing more existing conditions of the property. So surrounding uses include residential to the north and east, and agriculture to the west and south, and you can see the unpaved Belker Lane on the right-hand side, which provides primary access to Frenchtown Frontage Road and beyond. This is an excerpt from the preliminary plat. 3 of the lots on the right-hand side adjacent to Belker Lane, lots 1, 2, and 3, will be 0.8 to 0.89 acres in area, and lots 4 and 5 on the left to the west will be 11.84 acres and 3.95 acres. Lots 1, 2, and 3, moving right again, are intended for multifamily dwelling development for 4 units each, so up to 12 dwelling units for those 3 properties. And lots 4 and 5 would be intended for single-family residential and a combination of agricultural use as well to continue the historic ag use. So up to 14 dwelling units would be proposed overall for this subdivision. All the structures are proposed to be served by individual wells and septic, and new structures will be required to install fire sprinklers. While I have the plat up, I have a few notes on some conditions of approval. So you can see it's adjacent just south of the Frenchtown Irrigation District ditch. So the County Floodplain Administrator did determine that this area is subject to inundation due to the potential for failure of the irrigation ditch. And so there is a condition of approval stemming from a proposal of the subdivision to require structures to be elevated, and also that prohibits basements for structures. And there's another condition relating to the ditch that will require a irrigation easement or easements to lots 1 and 2 on the lower right-hand side, which would not abut the district ditch, but would still be in the district. So there will be easements to allow for the future delivery of water from the ditch. This is an excerpt from the DEQ lot layout that gives a little more detail on the eastern portion of the subdivision, showing the 3 fourplexes and 2 roads. So 2 private roads are proposed with this subdivision. 1, Gerard Lane, will be on the southern end, the south boundary, and it is providing access to driveways that serve lots 4 and 5. A second private road would run north-south parallel to Belfer Lane, and that road is currently unnamed. So both of those roads will be within 40-foot private access and utility easements, and will be built to meet county road standards for these level of roadway. And 2 new approaches will be built off of Belfer Lane. So this brings me to a public comment we received. So we did receive a public comment regarding or expressing concerns for impacts to and maintenance of Belfer Lane, citing an anticipated increase in traffic volume with the new residential development. That comment email is included with the staff report packet. So there are 2 recommended conditions shown on the screen here, 2 recommended conditions of approval, number 13 and 14. And these are recommended to address future road maintenance concerns for Belfer Lane. The first, condition number 13, would require an agreement for the property owners in the subdivision to abide by terms of an existing private road maintenance agreement. The subject property is not a party to that agreement, and this condition 13 would essentially have them enter into a new agreement for the subdivision that references the existing one. And the second condition, proposed number 14, would require a reference to said agreement in the covenants, and this part of the covenants cannot be changed or deleted without governing body approval. Moving on, there's one correction I do need to state for a condition of approval. So condition 8 requires notification to lot owners regarding the requirement to install fire sprinklers in new structures. And please note the correction for the last sentence should read, this section of the covenants may not be changed without deleted without governing body approval. My apologies for any confusion. This may cause to anyone in their review of the staff report, but the intent is for this section of the covenants to not be changed or deleted without governing body approval. Another condition to discuss is condition 10. Is a recommended condition to require annual well monitoring reports to be sent to the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation for their review and for CAPS to be copied on these correspondences. This condition is intended to ensure that the water usage on the 5-lot subdivision with up to 14 dwelling units is staying under the exempt well allocations per the combined appropriation, which is 10 acre-feet per year at 35 gallons per minute. So again, that goal is to make sure property owners are collectively staying within those limits. And this monitoring could be accomplished through, for example, installing individual well meters and outlining these responsibilities in their private covenants or HOA. And note that the subdivision regulation citation for this should be 3.6.2.5, which is a section that requires, in this subdivision's case, a letter from the DNRC stating that the water supply is exempt from water rights permitting requirements. And so if water usage from these exempt wells exceeds the well usage of 10 acre-feet per year at 35 gallons per minute, Department of Natural Resources, or DNRC, excuse me, has the ability to require users to pursue either a water right or a reduced water usage. And below this recommended condition, you can see a applicant's requested amendment on the screen, and the applicant has requested an amendment to this condition that would remove the requirement for annual reporting and have a notice in the covenants for compliance with the maximum water usage. So this concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take additional questions on the staff report or subdivision review, or I can go into more detail on different subdivision review criteria.
Matt, I had a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
Okay. So, and if it's more appropriate to have the owner or the developer speak, the developer's representative speak to that, that's fine. So I want to say I really like this design with the larger lot. Fantastic. It's great to see. It's really heartening. I want to make sure that that lot actually has a water right on the ditch and isn't expected to be irrigated entirely by a 35 gallon a minute well.
My understanding is that it will be able to use agricultural irrigation water from the adjacent ditch or the ditch easement, but I'll also let Missoula Engineering provide clarification if needed on that.
Okay, and then last question of the mention of lots of covenants in here, and I want to make sure that there isn't anything in the covenant that's going to preclude agriculture from taking place on that larger lot, even if it is at some future date, something around no animals or no trucks or no tarps, or the kinds of things that might not be appropriate in a neighborhood might be fully appropriate on a small produce farm or fruit farm or even small animals, to make sure that the covenants don't include that.
My understanding is that the commissioners, that the covenants, both as proposed, don't present conflicts of that sort, and that with the well monitoring requirement and the limitation on water usage, that those limits are related more so to domestic usage, and that they would still be able to use agricultural or make use of irrigation water for agricultural use from the Frenchtown Irrigation District ditch. But,
so there are covenants that don't have anything to do with water that might preclude any of the activities that would happen on a farm.
Commissioners, correct. That's my understanding, but I will also let Missoula Engineering provide clarification if needed to that.
Thanks.
Hi, Commissioner Slotnick. This is Jenna Sage with Missoula Engineering. And you are correct. For agricultural use, there will be access to the irrigation ditch.
Great.
And the proposed covenants do not have any restrictions on lot 4 or 5 for agricultural use, farming, or anything of that nature.
Great. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Hey, everyone, do you have any questions? And we'll get the do some presentation.
Yeah, I'll let Jenna present more if she wants to. She might cover some of my questions that I have already.
All right. Jenna, please.
Thanks, Commissioner Strohmeyer. I do have one thing that I would like to add for the amendment to condition number 10. The subdivision regulations that Matt stated, 3.6.2.5, and the requirement to have a letter from the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation stating that the water supply is exempt from water rights, permitting, and requirements. That was included in our subdivision application, that we do have a letter from Jim Nave stating that we are under the 10 acre-feet per year and that no additional requirements were necessary.
So I guess while we're on that, before you have anything else to add, Jenna, maybe this is more so a question for Matt. Is there a precedent for any condition like this on other recently approved subdivisions? I don't recall anything quite like this previously.
Commissioners, Matt Heimel again with CAPS. First of all, to follow up on Jenna, yes, that's correct. We do have the letter in this condition. It's really intended to just reinforce these exempt well water limits. And also, to my knowledge, yes, we do have precedent. One recent example I know of is the Hamel Lot 1 major subdivision, also in the Frenchtown area, that has a very similar condition of approval for annual well reporting to the DNRC. And I believe they're going about that by installing individual well meters.
And Matt, could you elaborate on, so what in our estimation is the trigger for having a condition like this? And it would apply for this proposed subdivision or the previously approved one?
The trigger in these cases that I know of is the number of dwelling units versus the number of proposed individual exempt wells. And we review this under impacts to local services under water and sanitation.
Commissioners, this is Tim Worley from CAPS. And I wanted to speak to the condition as it currently reads. B&M Zoo was really the first major subdivision where we recommended this condition. And then, as Matt mentioned, Hamel Acres Lot 1 actually volunteered these provisions as part of their subdivision application and covenants, including the metering of the individual wells. And part of our recommendation comes from that this is not an isolated thing that Missoula County does. Gallatin County is another county that does it. And it's more of a follow through just to ensure that that 10 acre foot threshold is abided by with whatever the exempt well package is. And that can end up being different things. It can end up being multiple wells within a subdivision or a single well. Or in the case of B&M Zoo, it was 2 wells that are proposed to run 24/7, and then that water gets stored in a storage tank. And then metering is required to happen from the different users throughout that subdivision. But it's more to ensure that that 10 acre foot threshold is abided by with the exempt wells in question.
Thank you.
I would like to just add another comment, if I may. This is Jenna with Missoula Engineering. During sufficiency review, we had 2 different sufficiency reviews for this subdivision, and there was no comment from the DNRC over any concerns of exceeding the 10 acre feet per year. Also, this is a minor subdivision, and B&M Zoo and Hamel Acres were considered major subdivisions. Additionally, all wells in this subdivision are going to be reviewed by DEQ during sanitation review, and that's going to ensure compliance with all current regulations.
So just a follow up for Jenna, Matt, or Tim, the actual monitoring, would that be conducted by the property owners of the lots and the wells in question, I'm assuming?
That is correct.
Okay, so it's not as though the subdivider, or the applicant or developer would retain any sort of burden or responsibility for this monitoring once the properties change hands.
That's right. The responsibility falls on the property owners collectively, and if the applicant is still an owner of a lot in question, then they would, of course, be part of that responsibility pursuant to this condition as proposed.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, Matt, you cut out on my computer. Can you repeat that?
Yes. So what I said is that the responsibility for monitoring reports would fall on the property owners, not necessarily the developer, unless, of course, the developer still owns one of said lots. It's just on the property owner for annual. That's right.
Okay.
This is Jenna again. It's my understanding that currently there's actually no established regulatory procedure for submitting this requested information to the DNRC or CAP. And that just brings a concern for lot owners and the HOA about who they're going to submit this information to, when to submit, and what information needs to be included.
This is Dave again. I don't want to belabor this too much, but clearly it's of interest to the applicant. Tim or Matt, how has this been? Clearly, since there are other subdivisions that have been approved with this condition in place, there must be some means, if not a formal mechanism, at least an informal understanding of how folks report this data. Am I mistaken?
Well, this is Tim. At this point, the subdivisions in question have yet to be built out, so there really is no track record for those subdivisions. One being B&M Zoo, kind of out by Blue Mountain Road. And staff has discussed this with Jim Nave of DNRC, and he favors this approach. And I think there's some flexibility in whatever the work product ends up being. It ends up being an annual report where you use the metering or whatever method you deem appropriate to present to DNRC essentially the numbers. So it's more of a good faith follow through. Staff doesn't really personally or corporately have any sort of enforcement mechanism with this. It's more in the hands of DNRC themselves.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Have any public comment on this?
And did Jenna have, Josh, did Jenna have any other material she was wanting to present?
I thought she was done, but Jenna, I'm sorry if I cut you off.
No, that's okay. I had nothing else to add at this time.
All right, then I think we're ready for a motion.
So I do have one other question, Josh. So going back to the ditch and conditions related to what might happen in the event of a catastrophic failure of the ditch. It seems like, and this predated your arrival, Matt. Tim, I think you probably remember, it was another subdivision out in the, maybe it was even the same ditch out in the Frenchtown area where there was some discussion of what would happen in the event that the ditch suffered a catastrophic failure and the water spilled out across the area proposed to be subdivided. Do we feel confident that the conditions in place in that unlikely event would ensure the protection of the homes that would be built here?
I think we believe that this is probably the best that can be done, considering it's not truly mapped floodplain. Mm-hmm. And it's trying to anticipate sort of an odd scenario where rodent burrowing undermines the bank of the canal. Now, with the other subdivision where we had a similar condition, there was also a requirement for a very specific first floor elevation for the dwellings. Todd didn't think that was necessary in this case, to my recollection anyway.
Okay, thanks. I was going to ask whether Todd had any specific comments on this. Matt, do we have the motions available?
Yep.
And I guess the one thing I would say is I'm always, and I share Commissioner Slotnick's appreciation for the effort that was taken to maximize the land mass of potential agricultural land, even in the midst of the subdivision. I am concerned always that, given this commission's desire to place a premium on prime agricultural soils and agricultural lands, that we don't find ourselves subject to death by 1,000 cuts, where we incrementally lose productivity of larger intact tracts. The conundrum here is that we do have a growth policy and this concept of activity centers, which I've never been a real proponent of, and I think the time has probably come that we expand the reach of some of our reconsideration of our growth policy and zoning out beyond the Missoula urban area and look at Frenchtown in that regard. But this is where we are today. So I think I am fine with approving what's before us on October 22nd. So with that, I would move that the Double G Ranch subdivision be approved based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law in the staff report, and subject to the recommended conditions of approval in the staff report as amended and corrected.
Yeah, Dave, thanks for saying that. Yeah, I share your angst, but yeah, completely agree. Second.
And Dave, thanks for pointing that out. I didn't want my enthusiasm for this nice design to get in the way of larger desire to see bigger intact tracks remain. So, and I'm super heartened that we're going to have new zoning in not that long. And if I remember right, some of it even reaches out into this area. I'm really excited about that. So with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I do believe that's all we got today, unless I missed something.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
There,
That was
yeah.
It's a wrap.
Talk to you guys soon.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.